Alright, so we went ahead, we inserted all our data, we calculated and analyzed the data using mean, median, mode, standard deviation, range. Now what we're going to do is create a histogram. Quick review on the histogram, kind of similar to a bar graph. In this one, they're using something called intervals. So instead of listing all the data values from -16 all the way to 16, they've kind of grouped them to kind of simplify the data and not have to list every single one and make a bar graph for every single one. And then on the y-axis, you're seeing your frequency, so how often those are occurring. So we're going to do something very similar, but just so you know, we're going to set up something called bins. Bins are just another fancy name for intervals. So what we're going to do is create the intervals for our histogram right now. So down here underneath your chart, there's something I already have it typed in there for you. It says bins. So what we need to do is figure out the bins that we want to use, or the intervals. So if you take a look, my minimum that I had was 5.1. So the very first bin or interval that I'm going to start off at is 5.00. Okay, so you want to go right underneath your min. I'm going to go with 5.00. So I'm going to type that in. You can also do the same depending on what your minimum was. Like if it was 4.8 for my minimum, then my min would have started at 4.5. So I'm going to be increasing, or I'm sorry, 4.75. So my intervals are going to be at 0.25 increments. You just need to figure out where to start. So I'm going to start at 5, and then my max is 6.083, I believe. So I know that my last interval is going to be 6.25. So I'm going to start at 5, and I'm going to make my way up to 6.25. So it's going to go 5, then an increment of 0.25 would put me at 5.25. Then it would be 5.5. And then it's going to be 5.75, 6, and then 6.25. Okay, because it goes from my min all the way to my max, and I'm just increasing by 0.25. So that's what you need to do, is determine those bins based on your min and max. So I went from the smallest all the way to the largest with increments of 0.25. So what we're going to do next is use that information to create a histogram like you saw here using your data. And the software Excel is going to do it all for you. You just need to know how to create it. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is where that add-in is going to come into play that we inserted or opened up in the first video. So we're going to go to Data up top here, and then we're going to click on Data Analysis on the far right. From there, you're going to look in this list and you're going to find Histogram. So click on that and then click OK. And then this window is going to pop up. The first thing it wants to know is the data you want to input, so the input range. And that data is, again, our D6 all the way to D25. So again, D6 to D25. And then we're going to go into this next box and click here. So you see your cursor, and that is our bin range, which is what we just made. So our bin range, we're going to select from here to here. So that is our bin range. And then the last thing we want to do is click on output range. So check that button right there, and then click in here into that box so you can see your cursor. And our output range is going to be somewhere, I don't know, right in here or so. Yours doesn't have to be exactly the same, just kind of select somewhere in the same vicinity. Doesn't have to be exactly the same that I did. Okay, so that's the output range is just where it's going to put the histogram at. So that's and we're going to move it later. So that's why I said it's not really important that you get the exact same cells that I selected. So again, input was our decimal feet. Bin was this information here. check the output, and select the area where we want to put the histogram. I'm going to click OK, and then you're going to see a bin and frequency chart pop up. So if you take a look at what this information is telling you, it's pretty much telling you the frequency or how often those data sets are occurring. So it's taking the histogram like this and just providing it in a chart manner. So what we're going to do next is use this information to make the histogram for us. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and just click on this thing and move it down over here. Let's go right there. So I just clicked it and moved it. In case you missed that, just select it, hover over the edge till you see that move symbol. Let's go move it right about there, kind of aligned with the other one. Alright, and then we're going to make sure that this is still selected. And then I'm going to go to Insert. And then up here in Charts, you'll have a little drop down here for Insert Column or Bar Chart. We're going to do just a standard 2D column, cluster column chart right here. So you're going to click on that. And you'll notice it took this information and converted it into my histogram chart. But we need to go ahead and make some changes to this thing to label our histogram correctly and then add in our axis titles. So we're going to do that now. And the first thing we're going to change is the chart title. So you can just click on this box here and then highlight that text, and we're going to call it class heights. And the next thing we want to do is label our x-axis and our y-axis. So to do that, up here while we're still in the design part, there's an add chart element. So if I drop that down, you can see axis titles. So let's do the horizontal or x-axis. So let's click on that. And then let's go down there and highlight that. And let's type in heights, or height, sorry. And then in parentheses put IN period for inches. So now we have that axis labeled. Let's go back up, drop that down again, go to axis titles. This time we're going to do the vertical or the y-axis. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to highlight that again. And this one is going to be frequency. Okay, so now we have our y and our axis, or x-axis labeled. And we're done with the histogram. So what I'm going to do is just hover over edge and left click and drag it and kind of move it over in close proximity and up a little bit, maybe a cell underneath the range. I just want to get it in close right there, so that looks pretty good. And then the last thing we're going to do is use the Excel software. And actually, before I do this, let's do a quick save. Let's go ahead and hit the save button up there. And the last thing we're going to do is create a summary of our statistics and let the software do it for us. We actually, in reality, to be honest, didn't need to calculate all this on our own. There is a way through the software to have it do all of this for you. But it's also a good way for you to double check your work here in a second using their summary analysis. So let's go ahead and do that. So up top we're going to click on data. We're going to go over to the right again to data analysis. This time we're going to click on descriptive statistics and click OK. The input range again is going to be our decimal feet, D6 to D25. The output range, I'm going to check that button. Click in this cell. I'm going to scoot this over a little bit and scroll up. My output range I'm going to do right here to about right there. So in line with the mean there, kind of the bottom, just stopping short of the histogram I did. So I'm going to let go of that. So there's my output range. Again, the output range is where they're going to insert that information. And then the last thing you need to do is check summary statistics. So that's what it's going to pull from this information. And then I'm going to say OK. And then it went ahead and it calculated all of that information for me. I am just going to try and drag this over a little bit, make this column a little bit bigger so I could read that information. Right about there, looks good. So I just made this column a little bit bigger so I could read the information. Again, I just hovered over right there and I could click and drag. And then I'm going to rename the title. Instead of column 1, we're going to call this Summary Statistics. And if you take a look, it's calculating all of that stuff that we already did by hand, and it did it through that data analysis add-in that we brought in. But I did want to show you how to do it manually, and again, now you know how to do it using the software. Again, the last thing we're going to want to do is save and then print. I'm sorry, just save and then yeah, we're going to print this. So you're going to go ahead and go up to File, Print. This year right now we have the HP Color LaserJet, so make sure you see that for the printer. The other problem is you notice that we are cutting off our information, we're missing stuff. So instead of portrait style for printing, we're going to change the portrait orientation to landscape. And now I have all of the stuff I want. I have my data, I have my bins, I have my histogram, my summary statistics, it has my name, so just double check all that and then hit print, and it'll then send that information to the printer, and you are done and you could turn that in for a grade.